Welcome to our presentation on how to best generate income, the next step on increasing profits on the proper protected position. We've already shared with you how to best protect your positions. The proper protected stock trade, you can view that directly on YouTube, and why one would use a married put in their portfolio, you can view that directly as well. The proper structure guarantees risk to single digits. It leaves our upside open, and it takes advantage of the three core principles, not just of the married put position, but of any options investing strategy. The proper position size, taking advantage of the at the money bell curve, not just for the proper structure, but for the income methods that come after the initial setup. And of course, the time decay curve, or what we call the red line. And this proper structure stacks the market odds in your favor. But how do we go from low risk to less risk to no risks? What are the steps that we use to reduce the initial at risk and potentially bulletproof the trades? This is where the income methods come in. There are 12 different income methods that we use on the initial proper protected structure. Why 12? Well, for different market conditions. After we open any position, we know that three things can happen. The stock can go up. Well, there are 6 different income methods that we can use described in the blueprint to help us generate income, lower the initial at risk, and potentially bulletproof the trade. Well, the stock can stagnate. It can stay between a small range of trading. Well, there's about 3 or more income methods that we can use when that situation comes up. The stock can go down. It could go against our expectations. And there are 3 or more income methods that we can use if the stock falls and we're expecting a recovery, or in anticipation of the stock falling as well. These can all be used after the stock moves or in anticipation of a stock movement going forward. The 12 different income methods revolve around the simple and yet even the complex, but explained simply in the blueprint. Once we set up the proper protected position, we could just sell a call, the obvious adjustment, generate income, lower the initial at risk, and still have potential upside profit. But there's much more beyond that. Other income methods give us the advantage of creating different spread positions, riskless spread positions, where we can still generate income and lower the risk and leave the upside open. Now, how best to generate income? Well, you got to follow the rules in the blueprint. Many investors see free webinars that we host, free webinars that we post, and say, well, I like what they're doing with controlling risk to 4, 5, or 6%, but let me do a little bit better. Let me control risk to only 1% or less against the proper structure that's described in the blueprint. Let me generate income against that 1% risk or 0.5% risk and guarantee no loss to the downside. And apply the income methods too soon, at the wrong strike prices, and create a position that actually increases the risk to the upside in the direction that you thought the stock was going to go. This is now trading against yourself, something that you want to avoid, and the reason why you need to have the blueprint for the full description of when and how to use the 12 different income methods. Believe me, I've seen this happen many years, and I've seen this topic and discussion happen year after year. It relates to direct questions. Are we not addressing just half of the stock trading problem here? We've controlled the risk. We've left the upside open, but what now? When do we take profit, and when can we set and forget a profit-taking structure? And this is what the blueprint answers. The blueprint contains the SIGA model for each individual income method, when to use it, when not to use it, how to use it, and how not to use it. A full chapter on exiting the married put and the radioactive trade when your profits have been met or when things aren't going the way you expect. There's a full chapter on combining income methods to increase the potential upside profit while limiting your risk. And a full chapter, of course, on the life of the RPM. What can you expect when you enter a position and how can it perform over time? Now, let's take a look at a discussion from a recent live webinar. We had a question from Marc who asked, when can we potentially decide to do an income method if we expect a stock to move up in price? Marc says, suppose you believe the stock price is going up. How do you decide to do one of the blueprint income methods versus doing nothing? Okay, I'll take my example today. And what he means by the blueprint, of course, the blueprint is the full work there that describes the proper married put structure and the 12 different income methods that are used in different market conditions, whether the stock moves up after opening that initial married put or the stock moves down, or if the stock stagnates. That's why there's 12 income methods. They work in different markets. Of course, we are running that special end of year bonus offer for the blueprint up until December 31st. So I won't get into that right now. We'll get into that a little bit later. What we're talking about here is the blueprint approach with the married put structure is deciding if the stock goes up. And you said you believe the stock is going up. How do you decide which one of the blueprint income methods to choose versus doing nothing? Doing nothing we sometimes call income method number 13. Do nothing at this point. Well, I put together another presentation today related to the end of year bonus offer for the blueprint, and it was related to the proper structure. And we reviewed going through the search tool and making some subtle changes. So some subtle changes I might make on the default radioactive search is we're looking for a risk of 3.5% to 9%. Let's say I lower that to 7.5%. In the stock fundamentals, the default's looking for stock price between 9 to 200, and I'm going to go ahead and put this down to 80 based on my portfolio. Earlier today, this gave me 6 results. Okay, we're at 7, and the Ritchie Brothers one is here as well. Now, this is the trade I posted in the Fusion account today. The subscribers for the Fusion subscribers, at Radioactive Trading, one of the benefits of that subscription is you get to follow along with the new married put trades that Ernie and I enter, and of course, following the income methods. Well, as a new position, let's just take a look, and I'm going to make some. This is really, really close. It was price was actually 940, and the stock price was at 70. Oh, shoot, 70.58, 70.57. My apologies. 70.57 was the stock purchase price. 940 was the put. Okay, it's about a 6.2% risk on the position. Now, I know this is a brand new position, Marc, and this might not relate exactly to your question, but I'm going to use it as an example as I reviewed in the video that we posted today on YouTube. And that is, I chose the 75 strike because it's relatively close to the stock price. It still matches the radioactive trading criteria and what I'd look for in a position. I could have gone with the 80 put and only taken a 4.5% risk, worst case scenario. I decided to go with the 75 because it's closer. Why do I open a married put position? When I open a married put position, it's because I have the sentiment of the 6 or so that came up in the list that this particular stock looks to me to have a better potential of moving up, let's say 3 to 6% in the next 20 to 40 days, which would put me right around that put strike price for the position. Okay, so I'm not always right, which is one of the reasons why for a longer term stock trade, we're using the married put approach, because if I'm wrong and the stock falls the wrong direction, this is the absolute worst case scenario at June expiration. The stock falls 5 or 6% in the next 2 weeks. I was just wrong on my selection. And that usually I get this 3 to 6%, 20 to 40 days, in the first 20 to 40 days of a new married put, about 68 to 70% of the time. I think it's 65 to 68% of the time of all of my open trades since 2008. That's how often I usually see it. But again, sometimes it doesn't. I'm in a position right now that I've been in for almost 50 days. It didn't do anything the first 2 weeks, and then it just started to descend. And at one point, I think it was down 16 or 17%. I was only down 4% on the position. I decided to stay in the position because it looked like it was starting to move back up. But in any case, my projection is, let's say 3, 4, or 5%. Let's say 5%. Okay, that would put us up, what, about 350. So it put me right at about 74.13, 74.15. So as of this moment, Mark, even though this is a new married put position, I have the sentiment that you said that I believe it's going to go up. Am I going to decide to do an income method now? What is my process for choosing to do an income method now versus doing nothing? In all honesty, on this position, I'm doing nothing. I do have the opportunity to do an income method right now that still puts this structure in a good position. Doesn't quite follow the guidelines in the blueprint, which is why I'm not doing it. But again, I could choose to sell. Let me clear out that drawing there. That'll help us, won't it? I could choose right now while entering this position to sell the January 75 call for about 70 cents. Now remember, my initial at risk is 6.2%. We've got an infinite upside profit potential. And if I'm right, and the stock does move up 5% as I'm expecting in the next 20 to 40 days, we'll be at about 74.15. Okay, about 350 up from where we are now. I'm sorry, 74.30. Did that wrong. 74.30. We're going to call it 74.25. Let me jot that down. All right. So let's run this scenario. What happens if I sell that call, get the 70 cents? Well, yeah, I've reduced my risk down to 5.4%. I still have a max return of 2.7% at January expiration. That is taking into account the theoretical value of our put option if RBA is trading at $75 on January expiration. Remember, I'm holding a June put. Now, remember, though, that my sentiment going forward is that I have the expectation the stock might be trading at best somewhere up here within the next 20 to 40 days. Although this is 70 cents I don't have right now, although this reduces my risk down to 5.4% from 6.2 or 0.8%, if my sentiment is that the stock is going to move up, I'm going to be able to get a better premium for this call than I can right now. I'm going to be able to reduce the risk further, increase the potential upside at the peak with this particular income method. So right now, even though I'm anticipating a movement upwards, I'm going to hesitate, and I'm going to look to do income method number 1 later. And if it takes 20 days to where we're only 3 days before January expiration, and the stock finally hits that 74.30 mark on January, 20 days from now. My apologies, folks. January 14th or 15th, let's say. What's going to happen? Well, the January premium isn't going to be what I want. This doesn't offer weeklies, just standard expiration. It still might not, it might be 70 cents actually, with 1 or 2 weeks to go to expiration. I doubt it. Oh, it's 15th of January, so probably not. But the February is probably going to be closer to $2, to $3. I was okay waiting 20 days to get double or triple this premium for the right strike price. I also may be able to sell the 80 and get better upside and get more than that 70 cents if what I'm expecting in the stock movement is correct. If my expectations are exceeded and over the next 2 weeks the stock goes up to 76, well, at that point, I'm going to evaluate different income methods. I might look to take advantage of adjusting the put, my second working asset. It's not just insurance. I might use that to move up following the rules in the blueprint to cut this risk by more than half from where I started at 6.2% and still be able to generate income also. right? This is part of what we call the SIGA model that's described in each chapter of the blueprint for each income method. It's the decision-making process that we use to decide which income method is best to use and does it match what we want to see. B, current conditions, whether you've been in the stock for 20 to 30 days, whether you just opened a new RPM. For example, let's say the stock's only up 1 or 2%, you expect it to move up further. That's your current conditions. Well, really that's conditions and expectations. Your expectations, the E. We've got conditions. Where are we right now with our position? Have we done any income methods before? What are the market conditions? E is our expectation. You're expecting the stock to move up. Now, what are your goals for the position? That's reviewed in the blueprint. Is it looking for longer term growth? Is it to get income right now, not just for your portfolio, but also to get income to lower the risk and the cost basis on this position? Or is it for further upside potential growth beyond just looking for longer term growth as well? What are your goals for the trade? Of course, the underlying goal is always to make money, but again, that's what's talked about in the blueprint. What structure are you applying to this particular income method? And the answer to those three determines your action. So what are the current conditions for me? I just opened a married put on a new position today. Let's add in what we talked about a moment ago for Mike. We've seen some sell warnings come up on the market sentiment indicator, so we may feel there's market weakness. Our expectation is the stock is going to move up our 3 to 5% in the next 20 to 40 days, being somewhere around 73.80 to 74.30. Our goals? Yeah, we want to generate income on this position. We're expecting further growth, so we'd like to leave the upside open. But in general, this is more of a shorter term generating income married put approach. I want to get income right now. 70 cents income I could get right now or today, right after I opened this position, was actually 75 cents at one point, at the midpoint, excuse me. That's income I didn't have today. But if my expectations are correct, I could probably get a better premium later on that more fits the guidelines of the blueprint discussed in that chapter for income method number 1. So for me, this is do nothing. Yes, you can argue that it's 70, 75 cents I didn't have. Right now, I can reduce it by 70 to 75 cents, still leave the upside open for a reasonable return on the position in 23 days, if it even gets close to that 74, 74.30, 73.80 that I mentioned. And you're not wrong. But if I'm more confident in my expectations of the stock hitting up to this point at some time, I'm going to wait and do that income method when that happens. But what I'm not doing, Mark, is saying that I'm expecting the stock to move up. We already talked about what I'm missing here with the 75 cents because I'm looking for a better premium. There's a reason why. I'll cover that in a moment. But I'm not going to just say, oh, the stock hit my target of 73.80, 74, 74.30. So now let me sell that January call right now. No, when the stock goes up to that, whether it's next week, whether it's the following week into January, whether it's 1 week before January 15th expiration, I'm going to reapply that SIGA model. What are the current conditions? I've been in the position for 12 days. It moved up the 5% I expected and is currently trading at 74.30. What are my expectations going forward? Well, are we still seeing sell warnings? And does it look like the market is overbought? And RBA had that quick run faster than I thought. And it looks like maybe it's overbought and it might pull back. That's a great time for income method number 1 or 6. Okay. If the rise came out from other news, other positive news that came out, I should have just wrote news. Sorry, folks. News that came out, and my expectation is the stock's going to continue higher and might go as high as 76 or 77 in the next week or so. I also might wait to see if that happens because now I've got more arrows in my quiver to adjust my insurance as well as generate income and leave the upside open as well. Okay. So, maybe now that it's moved, it's hesitated, that's a good time for 1 or 6. I think it's going to continue up. then I'm going to hesitate again. And if it does move up as I expected, I'm going to look at 4 combinations of 4 and 1, 4 and 6 as well. Of course, now that I'm in the trade for 20 to 30 days, and I check and I see that earnings are coming up in 20 days, I may do another adjustment to try to get the position bulletproof. That'd be income method number 3, prior to the earnings, and still get income on the position to further bulletproof the status going into earnings. That's possible as well. And then what are my goals? Well, my goals are still to get income, but I don't want to try to force the income continuously if it doesn't match the expectations and the current conditions. I don't want to trade against myself, okay? And there is potential here for other growth, but I could do income and leave the upside open with income method number 6, for example, so that's also a possibility. But at that time, my new SIGA model will determine my action. Am I doing that 1 or 6 right now? Am I looking to hesitate again with the plan to do 4 and 1 combination, or 4 and 6? Using that put option to cut my risk by more than half and then still generating income to get closer to bulletproof status. How close am I to earnings now? And should I consider a different income method to cancel as much risk as possible before going into that trade? And that will determine my action. And if none of those, Mark, really match all of the 3 components, none of the income methods match the 3 components, then I'm using what we currently refer to as income method number 13, and that is do nothing. Wait for a better situation. Wait for a situation where you're more confident in the direction of the stock and the premiums that you can generate for the position as well. Okay? All right. So that's what we're going to look for there. That's how I approach the income methods, following the rules in the blueprint, the 12 different income methods, how it's discussed for each one. And remember, if you head over onto radioactivetrading.com and click on the products tab, or you go to our specific landing page for the end of your offer, that's radioactivetrading.com/EOY. Yep, I just sent that in the chat there. You'll see a review of the special bonus offers, the special promotional introduction video. But again, the full story here at the blueprint, the proper structure, how to use the 12 different income methods, the decision-making process for each of the 12 different income methods, plus full appendices on combining income methods, I should say a full chapter on exiting the RPM, stock selection, and more. That's all there. And if you pick up the blueprint before December 31st, you'll lock in the special 8 bonuses there before the end of the year promo ends. So you want to check that out there to see the proper structure to limit risk, stack the market odds in your favor, and the full details of using the 12 different income methods also. Do you want to control risk and stack the market odds in your favor? Well, here's your 3 steps to do that. Check out the end of year bonus that we have for the full course on limiting risk and the 12 different income methods. Just go to radioactivetrading.com/EOY. Then pick up the blueprint or the home study kit, which includes the blueprint and the 6 Mastery Series videos, and start controlling risk today. Or join us on Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time for our special presentation on the role of the income methods. How do you want to approach your next trading year? With controlled risk, the ability to generate income without worrying about the downside, and approaching certain events such as earnings or the market unknown with having a controlled, guaranteed risk in place. This is why you need to pick up the blueprint, and now is the best time to pick up the blueprint and start controlling your risk today.